Thanks for staying with us. Back to our top story. Handing down its judgment last week, the Constitutional Court had some very scathing words for the former president, Jacob Zuma, and what he's done, his conduct in defiance of an earlier order for him to appear at the state capture inquiry. It also recognized the influence of a former president in South Africa's present-day politics, as we are seeing with Zuma. Let's talk more about this with the University of Pretoria political science senior lecturer, Dr. Sthembele Mbete, who's joining us by our live link to talk more about the events of the past few days. Doctor, afternoon to you. How would you characterize this moment in South African history?
Look, I think this is a very important defining moment in South African history, where you have the bounds of our constitutional order really being tested to their limit, and being tested to their limit by somebody who, for close to 9 years, was meant to be the chief custodian of the Constitution and our constitutional order. And so the way in which the situation will be resolved, I think, will really be defining for the way in which South African democracy unfolds into the future.
And talking about threats of harm or damage to that democratic system, how does the society and those at the very top of the governance and political system limit the potential risk to the democracy, depending on how much risk you actually think exists at this point?
Well, look, I think that at the moment, the way in which the discourse certainly is unfolding is that there are two opposite risks to the democracy. On the one hand is the risk of not fulfilling the order of the Constitutional Court, or the Constitutional Court rescinding the order that it has put for former President Jacob Zuma to be imprisoned for 15 months for not appearing, for breaching the court's order for him to appear in front of the Zondo Commission. So that's one threat that has been raised. The other threat, of course, that is being raised is the threat of violence, that if there is any widespread violence in defense of former President Jacob Zuma, that could be a threat to our democracy as well. For me, I think that the former threat of the Constitutional Court not following through with its order for former President Zuma's imprisonment is the greater threat, to be honest, because I don't think that former President Zuma's supporters and his support base have the strength or the weaponry or the resources to pose the kind of threat of a civil war, which is what they are wrapping up amongst the public. But I do think that if we don't have the former president as somebody who used to be the most powerful person in South Africa, being seen to answer to the rules of the court and for the rule of law to be implemented and to be upheld, then that is a greater long-term threat to our democracy.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is that it's perhaps inaccurate to characterize what's going on at the moment as a national crisis.
No, exactly. I think that what is going on at the moment in Nkandla is being given a significance that is greater than what it actually is, that the people that are gathered there that are, putting this show of force, I don't think are a material threat to the security of the Republic. And I think that we are mistaken to give them that kind of importance, which they don't have.
And do you imagine then, based on that very point, that the former president's influence politically has waned at all through the events of the past week?
Look, I don't think it's too early to say if the events of the past week have been significant in the former president's influence waning, but I do think that the former president's influence has waned since he left office. he is being kept going and kept alive politically through these court challenges and court cases and his own self-coined Stalingrad tactics. But I think that he is not as politically influential as certainly the theatre that we see outside Nkandla would suggest.
We know, at least legally, what the former president wants at this point. It's to avoid going to prison to serve that 15-month sentence. But the people who continue to gather, and many of them not even with political titles, what is in it for them to have former President Zuma out of a prison?
Look, I think that, former President Zuma is enormously charismatic and has really convinced many people that he is a victim of the legal system and the current political leadership, and has really galvanized a lot of people to support his cause because they feel for him, but they also feel that his imprisonment is a threat to a particular political order. And I think that he's done that incredibly successfully. But I don't think that the people who want to keep him out of jail stand to benefit materially if he really, does avoid a prison sentence. And they don't stand to lose significantly if he does go to prison. And so there is a lot here that is about sentiment, that is about emotion, and not so much about rationality or the real facts or threats on people's lives.
Two ANC delegations then put together quite hastily by Friday to try and intervene. We saw the KZN delegation in Nkandla yesterday led by Zikalala. We haven't yet had any sight of the National Executive Committee members who are also expected to go to Nkandla. Can the ANC turn the ship around at this point?
Well, look, the ANC has failed to exert any control over former President Zuma up until now. It's been 15, nearly 16 years of trying to exert the party's will and party discipline over him, which has been really unsuccessful thus far. And so I don't hold any particular hope for this process being successful. And I think that the worst case scenario would be if the ANC could exert any pressure over either the court process in the Durban High Court or the court process of appeal that is going to take place in the Constitutional Court, because that any ability of a political party to influence the operations of the legal system would be a threat to the democracy. But in terms of the negotiations that are expected to take place today, I don't expect them to be very successful. And
we're also back to murmurs now of a threat by the former president. He's also expressed this in his other previous addresses to his supporters about spilling the beans, if you will, if he does go down, basically saying, if I do go down, I'm not going to go down alone. Will that actually happen? Well, look, if he's got beans to spill, I really hope that he does, because the country's been held ransom for well over a decade by these threats of spilling the beans, of taking out of the closet all of the secret deals that were made with the former regime, everybody who was a spy during the liberation struggle. And if the former president has that information, I think it is better for the society for it to be spilt. Let everything come out into the light, into the sunlight, including any information about people's so-called faves, so that we can then start as a country from a clean slate, or certainly start from a place that allows us to get beyond this political moment. The issues around former President Zuma and the ANC and all the secrets have held the country ransom for well over 15 years. And it's time for us to put a stop to it. There are young people who were,
people in high school who were born when all of this emerged and started, and what kind of future, what kind of country are we leaving them with if we are still going to be mired in this discussion between really different factions of the ANC. And so if the former president has secrets to spill, I really hope he does spill them. Because the country needs it to get over this moment and to move on to a different set of issues, to a different kind of politics than the one that we've been stuck in for 15 years.
Dr. Sthembele Mbete, good to speak to you as always. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.